Say hey. Say hey. No, not me, to the camera. Say hey, my name's Sophie. My name's Sophie. You don't want to talk? That's okay. Hey guys, Katie here from the Wayne and Kate Show. And today I'm doing the quick thought. I'm really excited about this topic. It's really challenged me as I was preparing for this quick thought. So I hope that it encourages y'all and challenges you to maybe make some changes, or maybe even encourages you in a situation that you're currently in. So I'm just going to jump right in. And today I'm kind of going to be centered around a quote that I read in a book. And it's this book. It's called The Insanity of God. I highly recommend it. It's written by Nik Ripken, and he was a missionary. I think he's like of 25 years he was a missionary. He's written many articles. He studied the persecuted church in Muslim countries, but specifically the chapter I'm going to be in is chapter 18 on page 153. I don't know if y'all even have a copy of this book, but just in case. So in context, he's been interviewing these Russian persecuted Christians to try to get some answers about why persecution occurs, and how they deal with it, how they still manage to grow, because he was seeing growth. So he said, how are y'all still growing even under such strong persecution? They were being put in jail and tortured, and it's amazing. So this is the quote: "The stronger the persecution, the more significant the spiritual vitality of the believers." I'm going to read it one more time. "The stronger the persecution, the more significant the spiritual vitality of the believers." When I first read that, I had no idea what the word vitality meant, so I had to go look it up, and this is what it means. The state of being strong and active, energy. Okay, so I could substitute the word energy and it would make a little bit more sense to me. The stronger the persecution, the more significant the spiritual energy of the believers. That makes more sense to me. But we're just going to kind of break that quote down, and during these interviews, specifically he's interviewing one man, but I'm not going to tell you about it just in case you want to read it. It's super good. You should go read it. Anyway, and he noticed that the church was still growing even in all this opposition, all this persecution. They were still seeing growth and seeing God move. It blew his mind. So he even goes as far to say on that same page, "Looking back now, I understand that one of the most accurate ways to detect and measure the activity of God is to note the amount of opposition that is present." That was crazy to me. So he's saying that in order to detect God's presence and God's activity in a place, you should look at how much persecution they're receiving. Crazy. Okay, so just hold on to that, and we're going to go to the Bible for a second. And we're going to be in James 1:2-4. And this is what it says. "Consider it great joy, my brothers, whenever you experience various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance. But endurance must do its complete work, so that you may be mature and complete, lacking nothing." When I first read that, the first time I ever heard it, I'm sure y'all have heard it before, it's pretty popular, but first time I ever heard it, I was really taken, because he says, consider it a great joy whenever you experience trials or persecution. Consider it joy. What? Consider it joy? What does he mean? But then if you keep reading on, knowing the testing of your faith produces endurance. So what James is saying is, when we're being persecuted, we should say, thank you, because I know I'm going to come out stronger on the other side. That's profound. We should be welcoming it, because it's going to change us. God's going to use our situation in persecution to change us and make us stronger. And going back to this quote in the book, detecting God's presence using persecution, we shouldn't really be surprised when we are persecuted. James says, consider it great joy. Jesus said, don't be surprised when the world hates you, for it hated me first. kind of blows my mind. We're supposed to be welcoming it because it's going to change us. God's going to use it. So, kind of like a question that I want to ask, just for you personally to kind of think about. Do you see any persecution in your life? If you're a follower of Christ, are you being persecuted for your faith? Just kind of let that sink in. And a few responses, I think, if you say no, well, we'll do yes first. If you say yes, then you're doing something right. If you're being persecuted, you're doing something right. James literally says, consider it joy. You should be welcoming it. Please, come on, make me stronger, strengthen me. It should be something that you're excited for, almost. If you're not being persecuted, I would push you to kind of reevaluate your faith. Not necessarily your salvation, but just, where am I now? Where do I want to be? Where have I been? Am I growing? Am I sharing my faith? Am I sharing my story? That's where you're going to see the most persecution, is when you start going out and trying to spread the gospel and make disciples, and you start getting resistance. Jesus guarantees resistance when he says, the world hated me first. He almost guarantees us the world will hate us for following him. But that doesn't mean we stop. We should consider it joy. It strengthens us. So if you're not being persecuted, if you're not sharing your faith, you're not allowing God to strengthen you in your persecution. You're obviously not sharing your faith, which is a problem, And this really hit home with me, because sometimes sitting there, we can overthink things. Like, if God's telling you to go talk to that person, you can sit there and you let your fear just take over and say, no, I don't want to. I don't want to be rejected. It's too hard. You're not allowing God to use you, and that's a problem. If you're not being persecuted, I would dare to say that you're not sharing your faith. You're not allowing God to work through your story and affect someone else's life. You're not giving persecution an opportunity to come because you're not being bold. Y'all, this really challenged me, and I hope that it has challenged you. I hope that when you look at persecution, you see it differently. It's not something that we have to deal with or that we have to try to combat. We should welcome it and say, yes, change me, shape me. Like when Nik Ripken discovered that the stronger the persecution, the more significant the spiritual energy of believers. Persecution gives us spiritual energy. It produces endurance. So I hope that this has challenged you and encouraged you. And that's it for today. So I'll see you next week.